President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump both visited Texas towns at the southern border yesterday and delivered very different messages.
I understand my predecessor's legal past today. So here's what I would say to Mr. Trump. Join me, or I'll join you, in telling the Congress to pass this bipartisan border security bill. We can do it together.
The United States is being overrun by the Biden migrant crime. It's a new form of vicious violation to our country.
There's no red state or blue state where I come from. They're just communities and families looking for help.
This Governor Newscum from California, isn't that his name, Newscum? What he's done to California is unbelievable.
So instead of playing politics with the issue, why don't we just get together and get it done?
But this is a Joe Biden invasion. Horrible. Crooked Joe is the blood of countless innocent victims.
Compromise is part of the process. That's how democracy works. That's how it's supposed to work.
We did much better in 2020 than we ever even thought about doing in 2016. And very bad things happened.
We work for the American people, not the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. We work for the American people.
Nobody explained to me how allowing millions of people from places unknown, from countries unknown, who don't speak languages. We have languages coming into our country. We have nobody that even speaks those languages. They're truly foreign languages. Nobody speaks them. And they're pouring into our country, and they're bringing with them tremendous problems, including medical problems, as you know.
What are we supposed to do with that?
I mean, see,
why do people are actually voting? Is there really one person voting for
Not
that
just
guy?
foreign languages.
How stupid would you have to be?
Foreign.
He can't complete a sentence. He can't complete a thought. He talks about Crooked Joe is the blood of countless victims. This is vicious violation. I mean, he just,
does he even think about what he's going to say? Does somebody give him a little piece of paper or something? Because that's clear he doesn't. He doesn't even think.
Well, but I think I really don't know, Willie. Maybe you can give us some insight on it. But he looks so lost and confused. He jumbles his words. He tries to read a little bit.
He's trying to be nasty.
And then, trying to be nasty. But when he does that fifth grade or really 5-year-old taunt, Newscum, is that his name, Newscum? I mean, talk about losing about 18 miles off your fastball. Yeah. I mean, this guy's pitching 72 miles an hour down the middle of the plate. I mean, it's not good. And again, I just have to bring it up. He's lying, as he always does when he talks about the border. When he ran and was talking about the border wall, Barack Obama and Joe Biden had illegal border crossings on the southern border at a 50-year low. He's just making this stuff up every day. And then the numbers exploded under him. Then they exploded even higher under Joe Biden. And Joe Biden and Senator Langford, the most conservative senator probably in the United States Senate, and Democrats came together in a bipartisan bill. And listen to this. Joe Biden saying yesterday, let's put politics aside. Let's come together and pass the toughest border security bill ever, which, of course, those border security agents that Joe Biden is with right there, their union came out and begged Donald Trump and Mike Johnson to stop playing politics with the safety and the security of Americans. The guy on the left worked with hardcore Republicans and took a position that progressives in his party hate. But he came to the center, he came to compromise with Republicans, and actually even went further right than most of his party was comfortable with, and they got a deal. And then the guy on the right said, don't pass the toughest security border legislation ever. It might help Joe Biden. I mean, that's where we are right now. Donald Trump has said he wants the crisis to continue unabated for the next year.
Yeah, and he's given that order to the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who's very happy to take it and to turn his back on this bipartisan legislation led by that noted liberal squish, James Lankford, one of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, who worked for months to put this together, said, this is what you said you wanted from us. Here it is. This is as good as it's ever going to get. And yet the House won't take it up on the orders, as you say, of Donald Trump. So, Susan Glasser, this is kind of an extraordinary moment yesterday. First of all, to have the sitting president and his predecessor, and now challenger again, about 300 miles apart along the southern border on the same afternoon. What did you see there yesterday in terms of the president's presentation? This is an issue that has dogged him, immigration, that voters say is really important to them coming up. They say they trust Donald Trump more than they do Joe Biden. But now Joe Biden has been kind of handed this issue, handed this position where he can say, I support doing something about the border. That something is the bipartisan legislation that the guy who says he wants to do something, Donald Trump, has instructed his minions in the House of Representatives to reject.
Yeah, you know, Willie, it's really interesting to see finally this kind of direct compare and contrast, right? And I think in many ways the White House must have been hoping that there would be this kind of, here's Donald Trump frothing, name calling, sounding, sort of crazy and reckless, and Biden with these words of, practical governance, which in the end is the contrast between the two this year, right? Do you want sort of a party that's going to offer you governing versus do you want a party that's going to offer you this kind of demagoguery? It is notable that Biden chose to go to the border. I think even critics within his own party would say that he sort of avoided the issue for much of his tenure in the White House rather than sort of articulating straight on what a Democratic policy would look like in contrast with Trump's demagoguery. I think you're right that in a way this collapse of the bipartisan deal in Congress handed Biden an issue where he didn't have one. I do note that many of the surveys this year show immigration rising up as an issue that Americans are concerned about. I don't think that's good news for Democrats, given that more than any other issue, it is the one that's associated with Trump and his particular brand of demagoguery since the day he entered politics in
at CPAC, because what's driving this, the Nazis vote too, kind of keep them all in the tent kind of attitude, is that there is this like hysteria about immigration. Here they are at CPAC talking immigration.
The immigration issue is extremely simple. Seal the border, deport all the illegals.
Who the hell can win when you have 16 million people pouring into our country from places unknown? They have diseases nobody's ever even heard about. I'm sorry. I feel badly for the people, but we don't want to have this contagion in our country.
Our leaders are determined to repeat every mistake that led to the collapse of empires before us. Here are just a few of the common themes from history. Mass immigration and infiltration by foreigners who don't share our values and culture or even our language.
Contagion. They get even a Jewish fellow, Stephen Miller, and Ben Carson, an African-American, to say it, to say the words, to say the things. It's happening.
I think one of the biggest challenges is for us to remember what was life under Trump when he was president.
Sure.
And it was a constant anxiety across all of America. Mm-hmm. And we seem to forget that those words that they speak of actually have consequences. It was the El Paso massacre, the person who conducted that Venice crime against Latinos that was inspired by Trump's then president's feed saying that there was a mass Mexican invasion, right, and 23 people lost their lives. Those words are going to translate into something else. And what my hope is that as we are going into the State of the Union from the President of the United States, is that he uses that opportunity to remind the American people the contrast between him and Trump, and that under his presidency, we are a thriving multicultural America. My concern is for that child right now who is of immigrant descent, which is the majority of us, saying, oh my goodness, I don't belong, and being othered and being bullied. There's so many incidences that we are seeing right now of racial profiling amongst ourselves that are not even reported because people feel that they cannot. Yeah. And so what he is actually creating is an incredibly dangerous tension that is going to pit Americans against each other. And you know the only people who benefit from that? He will benefit because you allow grift, but then so do foreign actors and foreign agents.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I'm glad you said we need to remember. Because there is this mismemory where people are sort of trying to remember the Trump 4 years as the good old days. 1 million people died of COVID. Kids were being screamed at on basketball courts if they were Latino and called illegals and told get out of the country. I mean, it was an awful time, and people were so exhausted, they elected Joe Biden. But you know what Joe Biden is planning on doing right now? He's going to the border. Both of them, both he and Trump, are going to both do trips to the border. Now, the Biden team is saying they're doing it essentially to shame Republicans who refuse to vote for that border deal, which is, I guess, smart politics. But what do you make of the fact that the response on the Biden side, just as a strategist, is they too are going to the border?
Look, they're going to take away the one thing Trump claims he has, which is strength on the border. Biden has offered, and the Democrats have offered, the best and most balanced border security bill that's been out there in 45 years. And the people that are siding with the cartels and the coyotes and the smugglers and all the catalog of demons the Republicans talk about every
the Republican Party. So we begin the readout tonight with the freak show. This weekend was the annual Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC, a showcase of just how extreme the once grand old party has become. How extreme, you ask? Well, as NBC News is reporting, Nazis mingled openly at CPAC, spreading anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and finding allies. Yes, you did hear me say Nazis. NBC News noted in previous years, conference organizers have ejected well-known Nazis and white supremacists, such as Nick Fuentes, from CPAC. But this year, racist conspiracy theorists didn't meet any perceptible resistance at the conference where Donald Trump has been the keynote speaker since 2017. CPAC has repeatedly denied it, calling NBC's reporting fake news and grossly manipulative, and even going so far as to smear the NBC News reporter who was there talking to those very Nazis that CPAC says weren't there, saying our reporter was carrying the water for Hamas in his reporting of the recent Middle East conflict. Really, guys? Well, NBC News has the receipts, including both photo and video evidence of prominent white supremacists attending the event. Now, unless this was someone other than a Nazi giving a Nazi salute in the lobby of the conference hotel, well, there you have it. They are letting literal Nazis into their den of idolatrous Trump worship. I guess it makes sense, since CPAC goes beyond just Trump worship by also serving as the coming together of those pushing white replacement theory and anti-immigrant bigotry. And not far from that conference in Washington, D.C., you have almost the entirety of the Republican Party in Congress worshiping Trump, too. You have this guy.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it.
Even Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who clearly knows better, is reportedly in talks to endorse Trump, despite the fact that Trump has repeatedly mocked him, reportedly calling him a done son of a B word, not to mention repeatedly mocking his wife and former Trump cabinet member Elaine Chao. McConnell is preparing to kiss the ring. And today, McConnell, along with Speaker Mike Johnson, who just last week made the pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago for the mandatory thumbs-up photo with the man pulling his strings, joined Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries at the White House with President Biden to discuss the looming government shutdown. Now, of course, if there's any potential to prevent a government shutdown, it's not McConnell or Johnson who will decide that. They will need to turn to the party's real leader, Geppetto himself, Donald Trump. And right now, Trump's concern has nothing to do with whether the government shuts down. He may actually prefer it, believing it will somehow help him in the upcoming election. Remember, he wants the economy to crash before November. And that is where his concern lies. Not to become president, to provide for the American people. No, no, no. It's all to save himself from accountability, from the 91 criminal charges that keep him awake at night. It's clearly driving him crazy. Just look to his low-grade Twitter knockoff, where he screams in all caps that all these fake political prosecutions must be immediately halted. And part of that is because he's also really worried about all those legal bills. And it's not just the tens of millions of dollars he continues to need to pay for his lawyers. There's also the matter of the more than $500 million he owes from his civil judgments, including the fact that the meter is still running on his New York civil fraud trial to the tune of $114,000 a day in interest, on top of the $355 million principal. That explains why he's so desperate to get complete control of the RNC, to help cover his legal costs. And to make that happen, he's pushing for Trump loyalists to run the RNC, including his own daughter-in-law, Lara Trump. And what you're seeing is the entire Republican Party rolling over for him, even though he is a weakened candidate, as we've seen, based off his latest primary wins, where he has lost about 40% of the vote and faced problems not just with independent voters, but also with a large swath of Republican voters who are not willing to drink the MAGA Kool-Aid and who say they will not vote for him once he is a convicted felon.